Welcome to Boring Science to Sleep, a quiet place where science becomes slow, soft, and easy to drift through. Tonight we're going to wander gently through some of the greatest mysteries of the universe, not to solve every question, and certainly not to memorize every detail, but simply to notice them, one quiet thought at a time. If you enjoy these calm journeys through the hidden wonders of science, you're always welcome to like this video and subscribe, only if it feels right for you. And when you're ready, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. It's always comforting to imagine people from different corners of our small world, all sharing this same quiet moment beneath the same sky. Now, dim the lights if you haven't already. Perhaps let a fan hum softly in the background, settle into a comfortable position, and allow your breathing to become slow and effortless. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to solve, nothing you need to remember. For the next little while, you don't have to search for answers. You only have to listen and gently drift into the endless universe. Long before people built telescopes, drew maps of the stars, or imagined distant galaxies beyond our own, there was a much simpler moment. A person looked upward. Perhaps they stood beside a quiet river after sunset. Perhaps they rested outside a small shelter while the fire slowly faded into glowing embers. Above them stretched an ocean of darkness, scattered with countless points of light that shimmered without making a sound. They did not know what those lights were. They did not know how far away they might be. They did not know whether anyone else was looking back. But even then, something inside them quietly wondered. You may have felt that same feeling yourself. Not necessarily while standing beneath a perfectly dark sky. Perhaps it arrived while looking through the window of an airplane. Perhaps while watching a single bright star appear before the rest of the evening followed. Or maybe while lying awake in bed, when your thoughts became quieter than the world around you. It is a feeling that asks no urgent questions. It simply wonders. The universe has a gentle way of making even the busiest mind become still. The larger it appears, the smaller our worries sometimes become. A difficult day that filled every corner of your thoughts can suddenly seem surprisingly light when compared with the quiet age of the stars. Not because your life is unimportant. Quite the opposite. Because your life is one small, beautiful moment within something unimaginably vast. Every day we wonder what tomorrow will bring. Will life become easier? Will we finally reach the dreams we quietly carry? Will unexpected happiness arrive? Or will life choose another direction entirely? No one truly knows. That uncertainty has always been part of being human, and perhaps that is why the universe feels strangely familiar. It too is filled with unanswered questions. For every mystery that science carefully explains, another appears just beyond it, waiting patiently. The more we learn, the more quietly the unknown seems to grow. Some people find the art unsettling, yet there is another way to see it. Perhaps mystery is not something to fear. Perhaps mystery is simply the natural state of the universe. After all, even your own body is already part of an extraordinary story. The tiny atoms that make up your hands, your heartbeat, your eyes, and every slow breath you take tonight were not created when you were born. They are far older, long before there was an Earth, before there were oceans, before there were trees, were oceans, before there were trees, before there were even planets. Those tiny building blocks were slowly forged inside ancient stars. Deep within those stars, over immense stretches of time, simple matter gradually became something richer. As generations of stars quietly lived and eventually reached the ends of their lives, they gently returned those elements to space, allowing them to drift across the galaxy like fine grains of luminous dust. Those drifting particles did not disappear, they simply waited. Over countless ages, gravity slowly gathered them once again. Clouds of gas became new stars. Around some of those stars, small worlds began to form. One of those worlds became our home. Eventually, after an almost unimaginable journey, a few of those ancient particles found their way into you. The calcium in your bones, the iron carried within your blood, the oxygen filling your lungs. All have stories that began long before the first human ever looked toward the heavens. In a quiet sense, you are not standing apart from the universe. You are the universe, taking a brief moment to notice itself. It is a comforting thought, one that asks for nothing, one that allows you to simply rest. Sometimes people wonder what the distant future might hold, not only tomorrow or next year, but far beyond the lifetime of anyone living today. The universe moves at its own patient rhythm. Stars are born, stars quietly fade. New worlds slowly gather from drifting clouds. Galaxies continue their graceful dance through the darkness. Everything changes, but almost nothing ever truly leaves the story. Matter simply changes its shape. It travels. It becomes part of something new. One day, many years from now, the tiny particles that form each of us today will continue their own quiet journey, just as they have done for billions of years already. There is something surprisingly peaceful about that idea. Nothing is hurried. Nothing is wasted. Everything belongs. Even now, as you breathe in and out without effort, countless tiny particles are passing between you and the world around you. With every gentle breath, you exchange a few ancient atoms with the air, the oceans, the forests, and perhaps even with people who lived thousands of years ago. The universe is not made of isolated things. It is made of quiet connections, invisible threads stretching across time. Perhaps that is why looking at the night sky feels so different from looking at almost anything else. You're not simply looking outward. In a way, you are looking backward, toward the place where every piece of you first began its impossibly long journey. And somewhere among those distant stars, still shining with calm indifference, are places where new stories may already be beginning. Worlds we have never seen. Lights that have travelled for millions of years. Questions that have waited patiently for someone to ask them. You do not need to answer any of those questions tonight. You only need to notice how wonderfully quiet they are, because every great mystery ever explored by humanity began with someone doing something remarkably simple. They looked up, and they wondered. There is a certain kind of silence that only arrives after sunset. The wind grows softer. The sounds of the day slowly drift away. One by one, the first stars begin to appear, scattered across the sky with no obvious pattern, each one quietly shining from an unimaginable distance. As your thoughts wander upward once again, you may notice something that people have noticed for thousands of years, something so familiar that it often escapes attention. Why? Is the sky mostly dark? It seems like such a simple question, perhaps even too simple. After all, darkness is what we expect at night. We rarely stop to wonder whether it should be there at all. Yet the more carefully you think about it, the stranger it becomes. Imagine walking into an enormous forest on a quiet evening. Instead of trees, the forest is filled with lanterns, thousands of them, millions of them. No matter which direction you turn, another gentle light waits between the branches. If the forest stretched endlessly in every direction, eventually every path your eyes could follow would end at another lantern. Darkness would slowly disappear beneath an endless sea of light. Now imagine replacing every lantern with a star. The universe contains more stars than anyone can comfortably imagine. Our own galaxy alone holds hundreds of billions of them, and beyond our galaxy lie countless others, each carrying their own quiet collection of suns. If the universe were truly endless, and if stars had been shining forever, then wherever you looked, your gaze should eventually meet the surface of a distant star. The entire night sky should glow softly, almost as brightly as daylight. But it does not. Instead, between the stars lies an ocean of darkness. This quiet contradiction puzzled some of the greatest thinkers in history. Long before powerful observatories or spacecraft existed, astronomers simply looked upward, just as you might now in your imagination. Among them was Johannes Kepler. Living centuries ago, he wondered whether the universe might not stretch forever after all. Perhaps, he thought, the stars only extended so far before giving way to empty space. It was an elegant idea, simple, comforting. If there were fewer stars, perhaps darkness would naturally remain between them, but every answer has a way of inviting another question. If the stars eventually stopped, what existed beyond them? Was there another darkness, another universe, or simply nothing at all? No one could say. As time passed, another explanation quietly gained popularity. Perhaps people suggested the stars were still there. Perhaps their light was simply hidden. Imagine standing outside on a misty morning. A distant lighthouse still shines with the same brightness, yet the thick fog gently softens its beam until it almost disappears from view. Could space be filled with something similar? Tiny grains of dust, cold clouds, invisible particles drifting silently between the stars. Perhaps these drifting veils slowly absorbed the light before it ever reached Earth. For a while, this seemed like a satisfying answer. After all, space does contain dust. It contains clouds of gas so large that entire generations of stars are born within them. From a distance, these clouds can gently block the light of objects lying behind them. It feels natural to imagine that enough dust could simply hide the rest of the universe. Yet nature often turns out to be more patient and more clever than our first ideas. Imagine placing a stone beneath warm sunlight. At first, the stone quietly absorbs the warmth, but after a while, it begins giving that warmth back. You can feel it with your hand long after the sun has disappeared behind the horizon. Dust behaves in much the same gentle way. It does not keep light forever. It quietly accepts energy, and later releases it again. If endless clouds of cosmic dust had been absorbing the light of endless stars for an endless amount of time, then eventually all of that dust would glow as well. The darkness would disappear anyway. The mystery remained. Generation after generation, the question waited patiently. The night sky never seemed troubled by humanity's uncertainty. It simply continued being itself. Perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons hidden within science. Not every mystery is solved quickly. Sometimes an idea survives for decades, sometimes for centuries. People continue asking, continue observing, continue wondering. There is no hurry. The universe has never appeared to mind how long we take. As the years slowly passed, another astronomer returned to this ancient question. His name was Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers, and because of his careful thinking, this puzzle eventually became known as Olbers's paradox. The word paradox may sound complicated, but its meaning is wonderfully simple. It describes a situation where two ideas both seem reasonable, yet somehow cannot both be true. If the universe is endless, and if stars fill that endless universe, why is the sky still dark? It was not merely a question about darkness. Hidden inside it was a much larger question. Perhaps our understanding of the universe itself was incomplete. Perhaps one of our quiet assumptions had been wrong all along. Without realizing it, astronomers had arrived at the edge of an even greater discovery. The darkness above them was no longer simply the absence of light. It had become a clue, a gentle whisper, a sign that the universe might not behave quite the way everyone had imagined. Somewhere beyond the reach of those familiar stars, something unexpected was waiting. Not another explanation about dust, not another guess about distance, something far more extraordinary. The universe itself was about to reveal that it had never been standing still. The longer you sit beneath the night sky, the more it begins to feel less like a ceiling and more like a window. The stars no longer seem fixed in place. Instead, they become tiny lights scattered across an immense landscape, each one carrying a story that has been travelling toward you for longer than human history itself. For centuries, people believed the universe was much like an ancient mountain, solid, still, unchanging. The stars rose, the stars set, generations came and went, but the heavens appeared exactly the same. It was comforting to imagine that the universe had always existed in this quiet balance, a place without a beginning, without an ending, simply there. And yet, as better telescopes slowly opened humanity's eyes, small surprises began to appear. The faint patches of light once thought to be cloudy smudges turned out to be something entirely different. Each one was an island of stars, a galaxy, not unlike our own. Suddenly the universe became far larger than anyone had imagined. The stars above were no longer the whole story. They were only one neighbourhood within an unimaginably vast cosmos. Then came another discovery, one that seemed almost impossible at first. When astronomers carefully studied the light arriving from those distant galaxies, they noticed something subtle. The light itself had changed during its journey, not dramatically, not suddenly, very gently. Imagine listening to the sound of a bell drifting farther and farther away across a quiet valley. At first, every note feels clear, but as the distance grows, the sound becomes softer, slower, and more stretched. Not because the bell itself has changed, but because of the growing space between you and the sound. Light can experience something surprisingly similar. As galaxies slowly drift farther away, the light they send continues its journey through space. During that long voyage, space itself quietly expands. The light stretches along with it, becoming a little longer, a little softer, and gradually moving beyond the range that human eyes can naturally see. This stretching became one of the universe's quiet fingerprints. It suggested something astonishing. The galaxies were not simply moving through space. Space itself was slowly growing. Imagine placing tiny dots upon the surface of a balloon before gently filling it with air. None of the dots crawl across the surface. Instead, as the balloon slowly expands, every dot finds itself farther from every other dot. No single dot is the centre. No dot is pushing the others away. The surface itself is becoming larger. The universe behaves in a remarkably similar way. It is not that galaxies are racing outward into empty surroundings. Rather, the very fabric that separates them slowly grows, carrying them gently apart. This idea felt almost unbelievable, yet observation after observation quietly pointed toward the same conclusion. The universe had never been standing still. It had been changing all along. And if the universe is growing larger today, a wonderfully simple thought naturally follows. Long ago, it must have been smaller, not just a little smaller, much smaller. If you could gently imagine time flowing backward, galaxies would slowly drift toward one another. The vast spaces between them would become narrower, clusters would gather, stars would move closer. Eventually, the entire visible universe would become unimaginably dense, unimaginably warm, and filled with extraordinary potential. This is where many people imagine a tremendous explosion. But that picture can sometimes be misleading. It is gentler, and perhaps more accurate to imagine the universe unfolding, like a tightly folded piece of fabric that slowly opens, or the petals of a flower welcoming the morning light. The beginning was not an explosion happening somewhere inside space. It was the beginning of space itself, gently unfolding, every direction, every distance, every future journey of the light, all quietly beginning together. As the universe expanded, it also began to cool, not instantly, not dramatically, patiently, Over immense stretches of time, the brilliant glow that once filled everything gradually softened. Matter slowly settled. The first simple atoms formed. Much later came stars, then galaxies, then planets, and eventually, people capable of wondering where they had come from. Remarkably, that ancient glow has never completely disappeared. It is still here, not bright enough for your eyes to notice, not warm enough to feel, but quietly surrounding us at every moment. It is the oldest light in existence. A faint echo from the universe's earliest chapter, still travelling through space after all these billions of years. Imagine walking into a vast cathedral long after the choir has finished singing. The voices are gone, the people have left. Yet for the briefest moment, a soft echo still lingers among the stone walls. The oldest light is something like that. Not a sound, but a whisper of light. A gentle reminder that the universe remembers its own beginning. When scientists finally detected this ancient glow, it became one of the strongest confirmations that the universe had indeed been expanding for an extraordinarily long time. And suddenly, the old mystery of the dark night sky began to feel different. The darkness was not there because the universe lacked stars, nor because endless clouds of dust had hidden them away. Instead, much of the light simply had not reached us yet. Some of it was still making its impossibly long journey across space. Some had been gently stretched until it became invisible to human eyes. The night remained dark, not because the universe was empty, but because the universe was still unfolding. Perhaps that is one of the quietest ideas in all of science. When you look into the darkness above, you're not looking at something finished. You're looking into a story that is still being written. The stars continue to shine. Galaxies continue to drift. Ancient light continues its patient journey. And somewhere far beyond the most distant glow you can imagine, the universe continues expanding into a future that no one has ever seen. As your thoughts continue drifting outward, the universe begins to feel even larger than it did only a few moments ago. The stars surrounding our sun seem small now. Even our own galaxy, with its graceful spiral arms stretching across hundreds of billions of stars, has become just one quiet island among countless others. The universe seems almost endless. And perhaps that naturally leads to another question. If the universe is so vast, why can we only see part of it? At first, it might seem like a limitation of our eyes. After all, human vision is wonderfully capable, yet undeniably modest. We cannot see the gentle warmth that radiates from a quiet fireplace after the flames have faded. We cannot see the invisible signals that quietly carry music to a radio. We cannot see the countless tiny waves surrounding us every moment. The universe is already filled with things our eyes simply were never designed to notice. But the greatest limit is not our vision. It is time itself. Imagine standing beside an enormous lake just before sunrise. Across the water, someone lights a small lantern. The moment that light appears, it immediately begins travelling toward you. Yet if the lake were unimaginably wide, you would not see the lantern at once. Its light would still be crossing the distance. The lantern would already exist. Its gentle glow would already be shining. You simply would not have received its message yet. The universe behaves in much the same quiet way. Light is incredibly fast, so fast that it circles our planet many times in the brief moment it takes to blink. Yet even moving with such astonishing speed, light still needs time, a great deal of time. The light from our own sun reaches Earth after a short journey through space. The light from nearby stars may travel for years before arriving. Light from distant galaxies often spends millions, or even billions, of years quietly crossing the universe before finally reaching our eyes. Looking deeper into space is therefore unlike looking across an ordinary landscape. It is more like opening an ancient library. every direction reveals another page from a much older chapter. The farther you look, the farther back in time you quietly travel. Some galaxies appear not as they are today, but as they were before mountains formed on Earth, before dinosaurs walked beneath unfamiliar skies, before our own sun was even born. The universe does not simply show us distant places, it also shows us distant moments. That is why astronomers often speak of the observable universe. The phrase may sound technical at first, but its meaning is surprisingly gentle. It simply describes the part of the cosmos whose light has had enough time to find us. Not because the universe ends there, not because there is a giant wall surrounding everything, but because light, patient as it is, has not yet completed every journey. Imagine walking through thick morning fog. The world does not stop where your vision fades. The hills continue, the forests continue, the rivers continue. You simply cannot see beyond the mist. The observable universe is much like that quiet horizon. Beyond it, the universe may continue far beyond anything we can presently imagine. Perhaps endlessly, perhaps not. No one knows. And strangely enough, that uncertainty makes the universe feel even more peaceful. There is no pressure to reach every horizon. Some horizons simply remind us that wonder has no obvious ending. Yet another quiet surprise waits nearby. You may remember that ancient light from the earliest moments of the universe. Over billions of years, that light has continued travelling across expanding space. As space gently grows, the light itself slowly stretches. Imagine drawing gentle ripples across the surface of a calm pond. Now imagine the pond itself slowly becoming larger. The ripples spread farther apart. They become broader, more relaxed. Light experiences something similar during its unimaginably long journey. It gradually stretches until it moves beyond the small range that human eyes naturally perceive. It does not disappear, it simply changes, like music drifting beyond the highest or lowest notes that human hearing can comfortably notice. The melody still exists, only our senses have reached their quiet limit. This means something rather beautiful. The universe is far brighter than it appears. Even the darkest regions of the night are quietly filled with ancient light that our eyes can no longer detect. Invisible rivers of light continue flowing around us every second. Gentle echoes from galaxies, soft whispers from stars, ancient messages still crossing the immense silence of space. Sometimes people imagine darkness as empty, as the absence of everything. But perhaps darkness is something else entirely. Perhaps it is simply light waiting beyond our ability to see. There is something deeply comforting about that thought. It reminds us that our understanding has never been the measure of reality. Long before human beings learned to build telescopes, distant galaxies already filled the universe. Long before we understood the oldest light, it quietly surrounded us. Reality did not begin when we discovered it. It patiently waited, and perhaps countless other wonders are waiting still. Invisible today, obvious tomorrow. The universe has never hurried us. It has always allowed discovery to unfold one gentle step at a time. Every generation sees a little farther, every telescope reaches a little deeper, every question quietly opens another door. Yet no matter how far we eventually see, there will almost certainly remain another horizon beyond it. Not because the universe wishes to hide, but because wonder itself seems to have no final boundary. As you imagine that endless horizon stretching quietly beyond every visible galaxy, there is no need to feel small. Instead, perhaps you can simply feel connected. You are living during a time when humanity has learned to glimpse farther into the cosmos than anyone before. The universe has allowed us to see ancient light, distant galaxies, and horizons measured not only across space, but across time itself, and still, there is more waiting beyond the edge of light. As your imagination continues its slow journey through space, you eventually arrive somewhere that has fascinated people for generations: the moon, our oldest companion. The quiet light that has watched over oceans, mountains, forests, and sleeping cities for countless thousands of years. From Earth, the moon feels almost familiar, close enough to recognize, far enough to remain mysterious. Now imagine standing there yourself. There is no breeze, no birds, no distant sounds, only silence. The ground beneath your feet is soft with ancient dust, untouched by flowing water or growing plants. Above you stretches a sky unlike any you have ever known. Not blue, not pale, not even deep midnight. It is simply black. A stillness so complete that it almost seems endless. And yet something appears strangely missing. Where are the stars? Many people have asked this question after seeing the famous photographs taken during the Apollo missions. The astronauts are brightly illuminated. The surface of the moon is clearly visible. The Earth hangs beautifully above the horizon. But behind them, the sky appears empty. No familiar constellations, no glittering band of the Milky Way, only darkness. For some, this has felt surprising. For others, it has become a mystery. But as is so often the case, the answer begins with something wonderfully ordinary. Imagine walking outside on a bright summer afternoon. The sun fills the landscape with light, trees cast gentle shadows, the sky above appears clear and blue. Now try to notice the stars. They are still there. Every one of them continues shining exactly as it did the night before. Nothing about the stars has changed. Only the brightness around you has. The overwhelming light of the daytime sky gently hides them from view. The stars have not disappeared. Your eyes simply have something much brighter to pay attention to. The moon presents a surprisingly similar situation. Although we often imagine the lunar surface as dark grey stone, sunlight striking its dusty ground becomes remarkably bright. There is no atmosphere to scatter that light into a blue sky as it does on Earth. Instead, sunlight falls directly onto the surface, creating brilliant areas of light beside deep pools of shadow. The contrast is extraordinary. For astronauts standing on the moon, the landscape before them was filled with intense sunlight. Their eyes naturally adjusted to that brightness. The human eye is wonderfully adaptable. Walk into a dimly lit room after spending time outdoors, and at first you may struggle to see anything at all. Yet after a few quiet minutes, shapes slowly emerge. The room has not changed, only your eyes have. Tiny adjustments allow them to become more sensitive to darkness. The opposite happens as well. Step suddenly into brilliant sunlight, and your eyes gently protect themselves by becoming less sensitive. It is a quiet balancing act that happens without you ever noticing. The astronauts experienced exactly this. Standing on a brilliantly illuminated surface, their vision adapted to the light surrounding them. The stars remained overhead, but appeared much fainter against such overwhelming brightness. The cameras behaved in a similar way. When photographers choose the settings for a picture, they are making a quiet decision. Should the camera capture bright objects clearly, or should it reveal the faintest details hidden within the darkness? It cannot easily do both at the same time. Imagine trying to photograph a single candle burning inside a brightly lit room. If the room is exposed correctly, the candle may seem almost ordinary. If the candle is exposed perfectly, the room itself may become much darker. Photography is always a gentle balance between light and shadow. The Apollo cameras were carefully adjusted to capture astronauts standing in brilliant sunlight and the detailed texture of the moon's surface. Those subjects reflected enormous amounts of light. The distant stars, although unimaginably powerful, were also unimaginably far away. Compared with the bright lunar landscape, they became too faint to appear in the photographs. Had the astronauts pointed their cameras only toward the dark sky, allowing much more time for the faint starlight to gather, countless stars would have slowly emerged. But then the moon itself would have become an overwhelming blaze of light. The astronauts would have appeared almost completely washed away. It is rather like trying to listen to a whisper while standing beside a waterfall. The whisper still exists. The waterfall simply asks for more of your attention. There is another beautiful detail hidden within this story. On Earth, our atmosphere constantly changes the light around us. It softens sunsets into shades of orange and crimson. It scatters sunlight into the familiar blue sky. It bends distant mountains ever so slightly. It wraps our world in a gentle blanket of air that quietly shapes everything we see. The moon has no such blanket. No drifting clouds, no shimmering horizon, no air to carry a breeze. The blackness above the lunar surface remains perfectly dark even while the sun shines brightly nearby. To many people, this feels almost impossible to imagine. A bright landscape beneath a sky that refuses to become blue. Yet that strange contrast is simply another reminder that our everyday experience is only one small version of reality. The universe is under no obligation to resemble Earth. Every world tells light a slightly different story. Perhaps that is why photographs can sometimes be misleading. A picture captures only one brief conversation between light and a camera. It cannot fully recreate what it felt like to stand there, to slowly turn your head, to allow your eyes to adjust, to notice subtle details over time. Seeing is never quite as simple as opening our eyes. It is a quiet partnership between light, our senses, our tools, and patience. And maybe that lesson reaches far beyond the moon itself. Sometimes the universe appears empty because we are looking in the wrong way. Sometimes something seems absent simply because something brighter has gently taken its place. The stars never stopped shining above the astronauts. They waited quietly, exactly where they had always been, hidden not by mystery, but by light itself. As your thoughts continue their peaceful journey beyond the moon and beyond the familiar stars, another quiet idea begins to take shape. It is easy to imagine the universe as something timeless, a place that always looks the way it does tonight, the same stars, the same galaxies, the same gentle river of light stretching across the darkness. But the universe has never remained exactly the same. Even while everything appears still, change is quietly unfolding, not hurriedly, not dramatically, with extraordinary patience. If you were somehow able to watch the universe for millions of years, galaxies would not seem frozen in place. They would drift, almost imperceptibly, like tiny leaves floating across the surface of an enormous lake. Their movement is so slow that no single human lifetime could ever notice it with the naked eye. Yet over immense stretches of time, those tiny changes become extraordinary journeys. The universe is still expanding. Every distant galaxy is being gently carried farther away by the quiet growth of space itself. For now, this does not seem especially important. The night sky still feels wonderfully full. Our own Milky Way stretches like a pale river across the darkness. Nearby galaxies remain close enough for our telescopes to explore. Ancient light continues arriving from unimaginably distant places. The universe feels generous, almost overflowing with stories. But imagine allowing time to flow forward, not by years, not by centuries, not even by the entire history of human civilization. Imagine drifting peacefully across billions upon billions of years. Stars continue their quiet lives. Some fade, others are born. Galaxies slowly dance through space. And little by little, the distance between the great islands of the universe continues to grow. At first, almost nothing seems different. The changes are far too small to notice. Then eventually something remarkable begins to happen. The most distant galaxies slowly disappear. Not because they stop existing, not because their stars burn out, simply because their light can no longer complete the journey. The expanding universe gradually stretches that ancient light farther and farther until it becomes forever unreachable. It is a little like watching a small boat drifting across a calm sea. At first, every detail is easy to see. Its sails, its gentle movement, the people standing on its deck. As the boat moves farther away, those details slowly soften. Eventually the boat becomes only a tiny shape against the horizon. Then, almost without noticing, it quietly slips beyond the curve of the sea. The boat has not vanished, it continues its journey. Only your connection to it has gently faded. Something very similar happens across the universe. The galaxies continue existing. The stars continue shining. But over unimaginable lengths of time, more and more of them quietly pass beyond the horizon that light can cross. Future observers may never know they were there. This leads to one of the most surprising ideas in all of astronomy. We may be living during a very special chapter in the history of the universe, not because humanity is somehow the center of everything, not because our time is more important than any other, but because we happen to exist while the universe is still willing to show us so much of its past. Tonight, if you step outside beneath a dark sky, you can see neighboring galaxies through powerful telescopes. Scientists can still measure the gentle expansion of space. The oldest light in the universe still quietly surrounds us. The evidence of the universe's earliest history is still here, patiently waiting. But imagine a civilization born countless billions of years from now. They may build magnificent observatories. They may understand mathematics far beyond our own. Their instruments may be more delicate than anything we can currently imagine, and yet their sky may be strangely empty. Many of the galaxies we can observe today may already have disappeared beyond their horizon. The oldest light that tells the story of the early universe may have become so stretched that it can no longer be detected. The clues that guided humanity toward understanding the universe may simply no longer be available. Those future astronomers might look upward and see only the stars of their own galaxy, beautiful, peaceful, but alone. Without realizing it, they may conclude that their galaxy is the entire universe, not because they lack intelligence, not because they failed to search carefully, but because reality itself has quietly changed. The universe would have hidden its own history behind the slow passage of time. There is something unexpectedly touching about that thought. We often imagine that knowledge naturally increases forever, that every generation understands more than the one before it. Most of the time, that is true. Yet the universe reminds us that opportunities can also be temporary. Some discoveries are possible only during certain moments in cosmic history, and perhaps we are fortunate enough to live during one of those moments. It is almost as though the universe has opened a window for a little while, not forever, just long enough for curious minds to look through it. Perhaps that makes the night sky even more precious than we usually realize. Every galaxy visible through a telescope, every ancient beam of light finally arriving after its impossibly long journey, every quiet clue about the universe's beginning is part of a story that future civilizations may never be able to read. You do not need to feel sadness about that. Instead, perhaps it invites gratitude. Tonight, while you lie comfortably beneath your blanket, breathing slowly, the universe continues offering its ancient light with remarkable generosity. You happen to be alive at a time when the cosmos is still willing to share many of its oldest memories. That thought carries a quiet kind of comfort, not because we have learned everything, far from it, but because for this brief chapter in the universe's unimaginably long story, we have been given the chance to wonder, and perhaps wondering has always been one of the greatest gifts the universe could ever offer. As you continue drifting through the immense quietness of the universe, the darkness no longer feels empty. Instead, it begins to feel expectant. Every distant star seems to hold the possibility of another story, another sunrise, another sky, another world quietly turning around its own gentle sun, and without even meaning to, another question slowly rises into your thoughts. Could someone else be looking upward tonight? It is one of the oldest questions humanity has ever asked. Children ask it. Poets ask it. Scientists ask it. Perhaps every generation has whispered it beneath the stars. Are we alone? There is something deeply comforting about that question, not because it demands an answer, but because it reminds us that curiosity itself is universal. Long before telescopes became powerful enough to discover distant worlds, people imagined that other places might exist beyond our own. Some imagined civilizations upon the moon. Others imagined canals across Mars. Many of those early ideas eventually faded as science revealed a more accurate picture. Yet the question itself never disappeared. It simply became quieter and far more beautiful. Today, we know something our ancestors could only dream of. Our sun is not unusual. It is one ordinary star among an almost unimaginable number of others. Every clear night, the tiny points of light above you are not merely decorations scattered across the darkness. Many are suns. Some are larger than our own, some are smaller. Many are likely surrounded by families of planets, quietly circling them year after year. Only a few decades ago, no one had directly confirmed that planets truly existed around distant stars. It seemed reasonable to believe they should, but believing is different from knowing. Then, slowly, discovery after discovery began to arrive. Astronomers found one distant world, then another, then dozens, then hundreds. Today, the number has grown into the thousands, and new worlds continue to be discovered with remarkable regularity. Each one carries its own quiet possibilities. Some are enormous worlds wrapped in thick clouds, some are frozen, some are scorched by nearby stars. Others appear surprisingly gentle, rocky, temperate, perhaps not entirely unlike Earth itself. Every new discovery quietly changes the way we see our own home. Earth no longer feels like a lonely exception. Instead, it begins to resemble one page within a library too vast to count. Imagine walking along an endless beach. You pick up one smooth shell from the sand. It is beautiful, unique in its tiny details. But as you continue walking, you realize the shoreline stretches farther than you can see. The waves continue arriving. More shells appear, each one different. Soon, the question is no longer whether another shell exists. The question becomes how many you have not yet found. The universe can feel very much like that shoreline. Every star may hold its own collection of worlds. Every world carries its own history. Some may remain silent forever. Some may never develop life. Some may become homes to oceans, clouds, and gentle winds. Some may experience beginnings completely unlike anything we have imagined. When scientists search for life beyond Earth, they often begin with something surprisingly modest. Not cities, not spacecraft, not advanced civilizations, simply life itself, tiny organisms, simple cells, small beginnings. After all, for most of Earth's own history, life was wonderfully simple. For billions of years, our planet belonged almost entirely to microscopic living things. They quietly transformed the atmosphere. They filled the oceans. They patiently reshaped the world long before animals ever appeared. If another planet follows a similar path, then life there might also spend unimaginably long ages remaining small, quiet, and almost invisible. Perhaps intelligent civilizations are not the first chapter of life. Perhaps they are one of the very last. That thought gently changes the question. Instead of asking whether life exists somewhere else, perhaps we should wonder how often life continues long enough to ask questions about the universe. Intelligence may be far less common than life itself, or perhaps it is wonderfully ordinary. No one knows. And there is something peaceful about admitting that. Modern astronomy has revealed thousands of planets, yet the universe almost certainly contains vastly more than we will ever count. The numbers become so enormous that they quietly lose their meaning. Your mind stops trying to imagine them. Instead, it simply accepts that the universe is astonishingly rich, and richness often allows possibilities to bloom. Think for a moment about a forest after gentle rain. Seeds lie hidden beneath the soil. Most remain unseen. Some never grow. Some become tiny flowers that bloom for only a short time. Others slowly become towering trees. Standing at the edge of that forest, you would never expect every seed to become identical. Nature enjoys variety. The universe may be much the same. Every world begins with different ingredients, different temperatures, different histories, different chances. Some may remain silent stone forever. Others may slowly awaken. There is another gentle thought worth holding on to. If life exists elsewhere, it may not resemble us at all. Our imaginations naturally create familiar pictures. 2 eyes, 2 hands, a face looking back across the stars. Yet evolution has always been wonderfully inventive. Even on Earth, life has produced creatures that glide through oceans without bones, insects that see colours invisible to us, and tiny organisms capable of surviving conditions that seem almost impossible. If one planet alone can produce such astonishing variety, then the wider universe may be even more imaginative. Perhaps somewhere beneath another sky, life has found entirely different ways of sensing the world, different ways of communicating, different ways of wondering. Or perhaps there are worlds where no one has ever looked upward at all, where the sky remains beautiful, yet unquestioned. As these thoughts drift quietly through your mind, you may notice something comforting. The question itself is enough. You do not need an answer tonight. You do not need proof. Wonder is not diminished by uncertainty. In many ways, uncertainty is what allows wonder to exist. Somewhere, perhaps, another world circles another quiet star. Somewhere, perhaps, rain falls onto unfamiliar oceans. Somewhere, perhaps, another curious mind has paused beneath an evening sky, looked into the darkness, and quietly wondered exactly what you are wondering now. As the possibility of other worlds settles gently into your thoughts, another question naturally follows. If life exists elsewhere, why have we never met? It is tempting to imagine that another civilization, if it exists, might simply arrive one day, perhaps in a brilliant spacecraft, perhaps with a message prepared long ago. Stories often make the universe feel wonderfully small. Reality, however, is far quieter. The greatest challenge is not finding another civilization. The greatest challenge is the extraordinary distance between everything. Imagine standing on one hill at sunset while a friend stands upon another, so far away that neither of you can hear the other calling. You raise your hand. Your friend does the same. You know someone is there. Yet the valley between you is simply too vast for ordinary conversation. Now imagine that valley growing larger, not by a few kilometers, not by the width of a country, but until the distance becomes so immense that even light, the fastest traveller we know, must spend years crossing it. The nearest star beyond our own sun is so far away that its light spends more than 4 years making the journey to Earth. When you look toward that quiet star, you're not seeing it as it is at this very moment. You're seeing a memory carried patiently across space. If someone living there looked back toward Earth tonight, they too would see our world as it was years ago. Conversation becomes something very different under such conditions. Imagine saying hello, then quietly waiting years before hearing the first word of a reply. Even the simplest exchange would unfold more slowly than a childhood. A longer message might require generations. The universe teaches patience in ways that are difficult to imagine. And yet, despite these extraordinary distances, humanity eventually decided to listen. Not because we expected immediate answers, but because listening seemed like the most natural beginning. In the middle of the last century, scientists started building large radio telescopes, instruments designed not to see the universe with ordinary light, but to notice gentle signals quietly travelling through space. You might think of them as enormous ears turned toward the sky. They do not listen for voices. Space is far too empty for sound to travel in the way it does through air. Instead, they patiently notice faint patterns carried by invisible waves of energy, quietly arriving from distant stars and galaxies. Most of what they receive comes from nature itself. Pulsars spin with remarkable regularity. Clouds of gas quietly glow. Galaxies release gentle streams of energy that have crossed the universe for millions of years. The cosmos is never completely silent. It has its own quiet music. The challenge is learning whether, hidden somewhere within that endless symphony, another mind has left a deliberate note. This patient search eventually became known as the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The name sounds rather formal, yet its purpose is wonderfully simple. Listen carefully, wait patiently, see if anyone else is speaking. For decades, scientists have pointed their instruments toward nearby stars, listening with remarkable patience. Most days they hear only the familiar sounds of the universe itself, the quiet rhythm of nature, the steady whisper of distant space. Some people wonder whether listening alone is enough. If every civilization chooses only to listen, perhaps no one will ever hear anyone else. Eventually another idea slowly emerged. Perhaps humanity should introduce itself, not loudly, not carelessly, but gently, like waving to a distant traveller across an enormous valley. Long before powerful computers became part of everyday life, humanity had already begun leaving small messages behind. One of the first travelled aboard the Pioneer spacecraft. These remarkable machines were never intended to reach another civilization. Their original purpose was to explore our own cosmic neighbourhood. Yet once their journeys were complete, they would continue drifting through the darkness for millions of years. Someone wondered, if another intelligence ever discovered one of these silent travellers, should it carry a greeting? Attached to each spacecraft was a small metal plaque. Simple, quiet, modest. It showed where humanity had launched the spacecraft. It offered a peaceful introduction to the beings who had built it, not because anyone expected it to be found soon, but because hope sometimes travels farther than certainty. A few years later came another extraordinary idea. 2 spacecraft named Voyager began journeys that continue even today. Unlike any human-made objects before them, they carried something deeply personal, a golden record. Imagine preparing a small gift for someone you may never meet. You cannot know their language. You cannot know what they look like. You cannot know whether they experience music, laughter, or memory in ways similar to your own. Still, you carefully choose what to include. Greetings spoken in many human languages, music from different cultures, the sounds of rain, ocean waves rolling gently onto a shore, birdsong at dawn, a baby's first cry, a heartbeat, the quiet rhythms of life on one small planet. It is one of the most hopeful objects humanity has ever created, not because it promises contact, but because it quietly says something beautiful. We were here. We wondered. And if you are wondering too, perhaps we are not so different. Today, both Voyager spacecraft continue their patient journey into the darkness beyond our planetary neighbourhood. They drift without hurry, without expectation, carrying Earth's small introduction farther than any human being has ever travelled. Will another civilization ever discover them? Perhaps. Perhaps not. The universe offers no guarantees, only possibilities. And perhaps that is enough. There is something deeply comforting in knowing that humanity chose kindness for its first greeting. Not a warning, not a declaration of power, but music, laughter, greetings, the sound of waves touching a distant shore. As your thoughts drift quietly beside those tiny spacecraft, now unimaginably far from the world that created them, you may notice how small they seem against the vastness of space. Yet perhaps greatness has never depended on size. Sometimes the smallest message carries the largest hope. Somewhere beyond the stars, another civilization may also be listening. Perhaps they too have sent quiet messengers into the darkness. Perhaps they too are wondering whether anyone will ever hear them. For now, the universe remains wonderfully patient, listening just as we are. As the Voyager spacecraft continue their silent journey into the darkness, carrying music, greetings, and the gentle sounds of Earth, another thought quietly begins to appear. Imagine that, many years from now. Someone answers, not with a spacecraft, not with a visitor, only with a message. A faint signal arrives after crossing the enormous distance between two stars. It is unmistakably artificial, not the natural rhythm of a spinning star, not the quiet glow of a distant galaxy. Something created deliberately, something intelligent. For a brief moment humanity celebrates. We are not alone. But almost immediately another question gently replaces the first. Could we understand what they are trying to say? It is surprisingly easy to imagine receiving a message. Stories often make it sound simple. A mysterious transmission appears. Someone presses a few buttons. Words suddenly appear on a screen. Understanding arrives almost instantly. Reality would almost certainly be much quieter than that. Imagine discovering a beautifully written book on a distant island. The pages are filled with elegant symbols. Every line is carefully arranged. It is obvious that someone intended to communicate something important. Yet you have never seen the language before. You do not know where one sentence ends and another begins. You do not know which symbols represent sounds, or ideas, or numbers, or perhaps something else entirely. The book is not silent. It is speaking constantly. You simply do not yet know how to listen. The universe may present us with a similar challenge. Even if another civilization wished to communicate peacefully, there is no reason to believe their language would resemble our own. Human languages grew from human mouths, human ears, and human history. They were shaped by forests, rivers, oceans, mountains, seasons, and generations of shared experience. Another world would tell a different story. Perhaps its oceans are made of something unfamiliar. Perhaps it has no oceans at all. Perhaps its sky glows with colours that human eyes have never been able to see. Perhaps its people, if they could even be called people, experience time differently. What seems like a brief moment to us might feel wonderfully slow to them, or perhaps an entire century passes for them as effortlessly as one quiet afternoon. How could two minds shaped by such different worlds begin a conversation? For many scientists, mathematics offers one possible beginning, not because numbers belong to humanity, but because patterns seem to belong to the universe itself. Imagine placing two smooth stones beside another two. No matter where you travel, no matter which planet you visit, the quiet pattern remains the same. Together they become four. A circle quietly carries the same graceful shape, whether it is drawn in sand, carved into stone, or imagined by a mind beneath another sky. Certain relationships appear woven into reality itself. Because of this, many researchers have wondered whether mathematics could become a bridge between civilizations, not a complete language, perhaps only a greeting, a shared starting point, like two travellers discovering they both recognize the same constellation. Yet even mathematics may not be enough. Imagine meeting someone who understands every word you speak, yet has lived an entirely different life. They know the meaning of rain, but they have never felt it. They know the word forest, but they have never heard leaves moving in the wind. They understand what music is, but they have no ears with which to hear it. Communication is more than vocabulary. It is shared experience. Even here on Earth, people sometimes struggle to describe certain feelings. The scent of a familiar home, the warmth of sunlight after a cold winter, the quiet comfort of hearing someone you love breathing peacefully nearby. Words point toward these experiences. They do not fully contain them. Now imagine trying to describe such feelings to a civilization that evolved beneath a completely different sky. Perhaps they do not experience sight as their primary sense. Some creatures on Earth already remind us that perception can take many forms. Certain animals navigate through echoes, gently building a picture of the world from reflected sound. Others sense tiny changes in invisible magnetic fields as naturally as we notice the warmth of sunlight. Some insects perceive colours that remain forever hidden from human vision. Life has never chosen only one way to experience reality. If our own planet contains such astonishing diversity, another world may surprise us even more. Perhaps another civilization does not think in pictures. Perhaps it does not think in sounds. Perhaps memory itself works differently. Imagine remembering your entire life all at once instead of one moment after another. Imagine experiencing time as a landscape instead of a flowing river. It is difficult even to picture such possibilities, because our own minds quietly shape every thought we have. We cannot easily imagine thinking differently from ourselves. And yet, that very challenge is part of what makes the search so beautiful. It reminds us that intelligence is not simply knowledge, it is also humility, the willingness to accept that another way of seeing the universe may exist. Humanity has spent centuries learning that nature is often stranger than our first assumptions. The Earth was not the centre of everything. The stars were not fixed lights. The universe was not standing still. Again and again, reality gently invited us to become a little more humble. Perhaps meeting another civilization, even through nothing more than a distant message, would become another invitation. Not to prove that we are important, but to discover that wonder can wear many different faces. For now, no message has arrived that clearly tells us another mind is speaking. The universe remains patient. Its silence is neither welcoming nor unfriendly. It is simply quiet. And perhaps that quietness gives us something precious. Time. Time to become better listeners. Time to become kinder explorers. Time to remember that understanding another civilization would begin not with certainty, but with curiosity. The same quiet curiosity that first led someone long ago to look up into the darkness and wonder what might be waiting beyond the stars. As your thoughts continue drifting through the vast silence between the stars, another gentle question begins to form. If another civilization truly exists, how old might it be? It is natural to imagine another world developing at roughly the same pace as our own. Perhaps they invented simple tools only a few thousand years before us. Perhaps they are looking toward their own moon. Perhaps they are asking exactly the same questions tonight. But the universe has had an extraordinarily long time to tell its story. Our own planet formed billions of years ago. Long before the first human ever looked toward the stars, the universe had already spent countless ages creating galaxies, forming planets, and quietly allowing life to begin wherever conditions were gentle enough. There is no particular reason why another civilization must be close to our own age. Some may be younger. Others may have begun their journey millions of years earlier. To a civilization that old, humanity might appear very much as an ancient forest appears to a towering mountain. Beautiful, alive, yet still in its early seasons. Many years ago, an astronomer named Nikolai Kardashev proposed an interesting way of imagining this long journey. He suggested that perhaps the growth of a civilization could be viewed through a surprisingly simple idea. Not the number of cities it builds, not the size of its population, not even the sophistication of its machines. Instead, how much of nature's energy it has gently learned to use. The idea became known as the Kardashev scale. Its purpose was never to predict the future with certainty. Instead, it offered a quiet way to imagine possibilities. Imagine a small village beside a peaceful river. At first, the people gather wood from nearby forests to warm their homes and prepare their meals. As generations pass, they slowly learn new ways to work with the world around them. They build water mills. They capture the movement of the wind. They discover cleaner and more efficient ways to use the gifts already offered by nature. Their story is not simply about becoming stronger. It is about becoming better, working alongside the world that supports them. Now imagine that same idea unfolding on a planetary scale. A civilization learns to responsibly gather the energy available across its entire world. Its sunlight, its winds, its oceans, its warmth beneath the ground, its changing tides, not exhausting them, not wasting them, but understanding them deeply enough to live in quiet partnership with them. Such a civilization is often imagined as the first great milestone, a planetary civilization. Humanity has not reached that point yet. We continue learning. We continue improving. Every generation discovers slightly better ways of understanding energy. Sometimes we succeed. Sometimes we make mistakes. Progress is rarely a straight road. It is more like a winding river, slowly finding its path through the landscape. Now let your imagination drift even farther. Imagine a civilization that has lived peacefully for many thousands or even millions of years. Its understanding continues to grow. Eventually it begins looking not only at the energy of its planet, but at the quiet brilliance of its star. Every second a star pours unimaginable amounts of light and warmth into surrounding space. Most of that energy simply continues outward forever, never touching a planet at all. What if an extraordinarily patient civilization eventually learned to gather a meaningful portion of that light? Not by extinguishing the star, not by changing its gentle nature, simply by collecting part of the endless stream already flowing into space. Astronomers have imagined many possibilities. One of the most famous is sometimes described as an immense family of structures quietly orbiting a star, capturing tiny fractions of its light. You need not picture giant machines or complicated engineering. Instead, imagine countless leaves floating across the surface of a peaceful lake. No single leaf covers the water, yet together they gently gather sunlight throughout the day. The image is only a metaphor, a way of imagining how a civilization might slowly grow beyond the limits of one small world. And if such growth continued for unimaginable length of time, another possibility quietly appears. What if an entire galaxy eventually became home? A civilization that learned to travel patiently from one star to another, not hurriedly, not conquering, simply exploring, learning, building gentle communities beneath many different suns. At first, such an idea feels almost impossible. The distances remain enormous. Even light itself spends thousands of years crossing significant portions of a galaxy. Yet the universe measures time differently than we do. What feels impossible within one human lifetime may become entirely ordinary across millions of years. The Kardashev scale is not really a ladder. It is more like a tree. Some branches may continue growing, others may stop. Some civilizations may choose not to expand at all. Perhaps wisdom teaches contentment rather than endless growth. Perhaps the greatest achievement is not gathering more energy. Perhaps it is learning how little is truly needed. That possibility is just as beautiful. Sometimes people imagine advanced civilizations as dazzling displays of technology, brilliant cities surrounding stars, machines beyond comprehension. Yet there is another possibility that feels strangely peaceful. The oldest civilizations may become quieter, not louder, more harmonious, not more extravagant. Think of an old forest. It is far more complex than a newly planted garden. Countless living things depend upon one another. Every leaf, every root, every tiny stream plays a role. And yet, from a distance, the forest appears wonderfully calm. Perhaps true maturity often looks like simplicity. If another civilization has survived for millions of years, perhaps it learned long ago that balance is more valuable than excess, that cooperation lasts longer than conflict, that patience carries life farther than speed. We cannot know. The universe has not yet answered that question. But imagining these possibilities gently changes the way we see ourselves. Humanity is still young, curious, occasionally uncertain, still learning how to care for one small planet beneath one ordinary star. There is no shame in that. Every great journey begins with small steps. Every ancient tree was once a quiet seed. Every galaxy is filled with stars that began as drifting clouds of dust. Growth has always been one of the universe's favourite stories, and perhaps, somewhere beneath another distant sun, another civilization has simply had a little more time to continue that story. There is a particular kind of silence that can only be found far from busy places. Imagine standing alone in an ancient forest just before dawn. The air is cool, the trees hardly move. Somewhere nearby, a small stream continues its patient journey over smooth stones. A bird sings once, then grows quiet again. You wait, not because you expect something dramatic to happen, only because the stillness itself feels meaningful. You begin to notice every tiny sound, every gentle breath of wind, every leaf settling softly back onto a branch. And somewhere, beneath all that quietness, you realize you'd been expecting something else. Another voice, another presence, another traveller walking through the same forest. But none appears. As your thoughts drift farther beyond our own world, that quiet forest slowly becomes the universe itself. Billions of stars, countless planets, a history stretching across unimaginable ages, and yet the cosmos remains astonishingly silent. That silence has quietly puzzled scientists for many generations. One afternoon, during a casual conversation many years ago, the physicist Enrico Fermi asked a remarkably simple question. If intelligent civilizations are possible, where is everybody? He did not ask it as a challenge, nor as a declaration that no one exists. It was simply an observation. The universe is incredibly old. Many stars are billions of years older than our own sun. If even a small number of civilizations had appeared long before humanity, some might have had enormous amounts of time to explore, communicate, or leave gentle traces of their existence. And yet, when we look into the sky, we find only silence. The question became known as the Fermi Paradox. A paradox is simply a situation that feels difficult to explain. Two ideas appear reasonable, yet they seem unable to fit together. On one hand, the universe appears rich with possibilities. On the other, we have not yet found clear evidence that another technological civilization is sharing this immense cosmic ocean with us. Over the years, many thoughtful ideas have been offered. None have been proven. Each is simply another quiet path through the forest. One possibility is wonderfully simple. Perhaps intelligent life is genuinely rare, not impossible, not unique, simply uncommon. Life itself may emerge on many worlds. Tiny cells, simple organisms, gentle beginnings. But the long journey toward curiosity, language, science, and civilizations capable of looking toward the stars may require an extraordinary chain of fortunate events. Earth has experienced countless moments when life could have disappeared forever. Asteroid impacts, volcanoes, changing climates, mass extinctions. Again and again, life quietly continued. Perhaps our story contains more fortunate chapters than we usually realize. Some scientists gently refer to this idea as the rare Earth hypothesis. Not because Earth must be the only living world, but because the precise combination of conditions that allowed complex life to flourish here may be less common than we once imagined. Another possibility feels almost playful. Imagine visiting a beautiful nature reserve. The animals continue living peacefully. Visitors observe them carefully. Photographs are taken. Notes are written. Yet the visitors do not interrupt the animals' lives. They do not announce themselves. They quietly watch from a respectful distance. Some have wondered whether an advanced civilization might behave in a similar way. Perhaps they have already noticed young civilizations like ours. Perhaps they simply choose not to interfere, not out of fear, not out of indifference, but out of patience. This gentle idea is sometimes called the zoo hypothesis. No evidence supports it. No evidence disproves it. It remains only an imaginative possibility. Yet it reminds us that silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence is simply a choice. Then there is another thought, one that carries a little more weight. Imagine a long path through a forest. Many travellers begin walking, but somewhere along the journey stands an invisible gate. Most never pass beyond it. Perhaps civilizations often discover powerful technologies before they discover the wisdom to use them. Perhaps environmental changes become too difficult to overcome. Perhaps resources disappear. Perhaps curiosity itself slowly fades. Scientists sometimes describe this unknown challenge as the great filter. No one knows where it might be. Perhaps it lies behind us. If so, humanity has already passed one of the most unlikely stages of existence. Or perhaps it still waits somewhere ahead, unseen. There is no need to fear this idea. It is not a prediction. Only another way of asking how civilizations survive across immense stretches of time, and perhaps the answer is not strength. Perhaps it is kindness. Perhaps it is cooperation. Perhaps the civilizations that endure the longest are not those that become the most powerful, but those that learn to live gently with one another and with the worlds that gave them life. As these possibilities drift quietly through your thoughts, you may notice something comforting. None of them require loneliness. Silence is not proof that no one exists. When you stand beside a calm lake at sunset, the water often appears perfectly still. Yet beneath the surface, countless living things continue their quiet lives. The stillness above does not reveal the richness below. The universe may be much the same. Its silence may simply reflect the immense distances between worlds, or the extraordinary patience required for civilizations to find one another, or perhaps everyone is listening, waiting for someone else to speak first. For now, we simply do not know. And perhaps there is unexpected peace in admitting that. Science has never been about pretending to possess every answer. Its quiet strength comes from asking careful questions, waiting patiently, and allowing reality to reveal itself one small piece at a time. Tonight the stars continue shining above you exactly as they always have. The silence between them remains vast, gentle, unbroken. Yet silence has its own language. It invites attention. It encourages humility. It reminds you that the greatest mysteries are often not hidden by noise, but by quietness. And somewhere, beyond the reach of even our most distant telescopes, another curious mind may be standing beneath another evening sky, listening to the same immense silence, and wondering, just as you are, whether anyone else is listening too. The universe has been quiet for a very long time. Not silent in the sense that nothing happens. Stars continue to shine. Galaxies slowly drift apart. Nebulas gently glow. Invisible waves of energy travel endlessly across the darkness. The universe is alive with quiet motion. Yet after listening for many years, humanity had never found a clear sign that another civilization was speaking. The great silence remained, patient, endless, almost comforting, and then, for just a brief moment, it seemed as though the silence whispered back. Imagine sitting beside the shore of a vast ocean late at night. The waves arrive with a slow, familiar rhythm. Again, and again, and again. You have listened for hours, perhaps even days. The sound has become so familiar that it almost disappears into the background of your thoughts. Then, somewhere far across the water, you hear something unexpected. Not loud, not frightening, just different. A single note, clear enough that you immediately notice it. Before you can fully understand what you have heard, it is already gone. The waves continue exactly as they always have. The ocean returns to its quiet rhythm. You begin wondering whether the sound was real, or whether it was simply one brief moment carried by the wind. That feeling is surprisingly close to what many astronomers experienced during one remarkable summer in the 1970s. For years, scientists had been patiently listening to the sky using large radio telescopes. These remarkable instruments were not searching for ordinary sound. Instead, they were quietly observing faint radio waves arriving from every direction in space. Most of what they received was exactly what they expected: natural signals. The steady patterns produced by stars, gentle emissions from distant clouds of gas, the quiet background of the universe itself, everything followed familiar rhythms. Then one day, something unusual appeared. A signal rose above the ordinary background. It was noticeably stronger than expected. It lasted for less than a minute, then it disappeared. When one of the scientists reviewing the printed data noticed it, he was so surprised that he wrote one simple word beside the numbers. Wow! That small handwritten word would eventually become the name by which the event is remembered. The WOW signal. It is a wonderfully human name. Not technical, not complicated. Simply the quiet expression of genuine surprise. What made the signal so interesting was not merely its strength. It also appeared in a part of the radio spectrum that many researchers had long considered especially promising. Some scientists had suggested that if another civilization wished to send a signal intended to be noticed across the stars, this region might be a sensible place to transmit it. Nature itself is relatively quiet there. A deliberate message might stand out more clearly. The mysterious signal seemed to arrive from roughly the right place. It behaved in ways that looked intriguing. For a brief time, imaginations quietly awakened around the world. Had someone finally answered? Had another civilization, somewhere among the stars, reached across the darkness? The possibility was breathtaking. But science moves slowly, almost gently. Excitement alone is never enough. A discovery becomes trustworthy only when it can be examined again and again. So astronomers did exactly what careful observers always do. They listened again and again and again. The telescope returned to the same region of the sky. Other instruments searched as well. Years passed, then decades. The mysterious signal never returned. That single whisper remained alone. Because it appeared only once, no one could confidently explain what had happened. Perhaps it came from an unusual natural event that we still do not fully understand. Perhaps it was caused by something much closer to Earth. Perhaps it was an extraordinary coincidence. Or perhaps, though we cannot say with confidence, it truly was an artificial signal that simply never repeated. Science does not choose among these possibilities based upon hope. It waits for evidence. There is something quietly beautiful about that patience. Imagine finding one unfamiliar footprint along a forest path. You would naturally become curious. You might wonder who passed there, when they came, where they were going. But a single footprint is not enough to tell the entire story. You continue walking, looking carefully, waiting to see whether another footprint appears. If none ever does, the mystery remains. Not because the first footprint vanished, but because one clue alone cannot reveal everything. The wow signal is very much like that lone footprint. It reminds us that the universe still contains moments we cannot fully explain. Not every mystery becomes a discovery. Not every unanswered question hides an extraordinary answer. Sometimes uncertainty simply remains uncertainty, and that is perfectly acceptable. In fact, it is one of the quiet strengths of science. To say, "we do not know yet," requires remarkable honesty. It leaves the door open, not for fantasy, but for future understanding. Perhaps somewhere another telescope will one day notice a similar signal. Perhaps new instruments, far more sensitive than those of the past, will discover patterns that were once invisible. Or perhaps the mystery will gradually find an entirely natural explanation. Either outcome would deepen our understanding of the universe. Neither would diminish its beauty. As you rest comfortably now, you can imagine that enormous radio telescope still standing patiently beneath the open sky. Night after night, season after season, listening without expectation, never demanding that the universe speak, simply remaining ready should another quiet whisper arrive. There is something deeply peaceful about that image. The universe owes us no answers. Yet we continue listening with kindness rather than impatience, with curiosity rather than certainty, because perhaps the act of listening is already a kind of conversation, and whether the next whisper comes tomorrow or thousands of years from now, the sky above will remain just as patient as it has always been, quietly holding its countless stories among the stars. After listening so patiently to the quiet whisper of the universe, it is natural to wonder whether every unusual discovery truly leads to something extraordinary. Sometimes it does, sometimes. The universe gently asks us to look again. Imagine walking through a peaceful valley just after sunrise. Far ahead, the morning mist gathers into a graceful shape. For a moment, it almost looks like a distant traveller standing quietly among the trees. You slow your steps. You watch carefully. The figure seems perfectly real. Yet as the sunlight grows warmer and the mist slowly begins to drift, the traveller quietly disappears. There was never anyone standing there. Only light. Only air. Only your mind gently weaving a story from what it could see. The universe sometimes offers moments like this, not because it wishes to deceive us, but because nature is often more subtle than our first impression. One of the most memorable examples began around a bright young star known as Fomalhaut. Compared with our own sun, Fomalhaut is still relatively youthful. Around it stretches a broad ring of dust, tiny grains left behind by countless collisions between icy bodies and rocky fragments, quietly circling their star over immense spans of time. To astronomers, it was already a fascinating place. Then something even more exciting appeared. Careful observations revealed what looked very much like a distant planet moving near the dusty ring. It was given a simple name, Fomalhaut b. For many people, it seemed like a wonderful discovery. Perhaps this was another world beyond our solar system, a young planet still glowing faintly in the darkness. Images were shared across the world. Artists imagined what this distant place might look like. The discovery inspired curiosity, excitement, and quiet wonder. But science has a gentle habit. It keeps looking. One observation is rarely the end of a story. Years passed. More telescopes turned toward Fomalhaut. New images arrived. Astronomers compared old observations with new ones. Little by little, something unexpected began to emerge. The object was behaving in ways that did not quite fit the picture of an ordinary planet. It appeared strangely bright in visible light. Yet when scientists searched for the warmth that a young giant planet would normally give off, they found remarkably little. The object also seemed to change over time. Instead of remaining compact and well-defined, it slowly became more diffuse, almost as though it were gently spreading outward. The more carefully researchers looked, the less it resembled a planet. Eventually another explanation began to feel more convincing. Perhaps no planet had ever been seen at all. Instead, astronomers suggested that they were watching the expanding cloud of dust left behind after two icy worlds had quietly collided. Imagine two snowflakes drifting together in the still air. They touch. They break apart. Tiny crystals scatter gently in every direction. For a brief time, sunlight catches those countless fragments, making the cloud appear bright and beautiful. Then, little by little, the pieces continue drifting farther apart. The cloud grows softer, more transparent, until eventually it blends back into the quietness around it. Something like that may have happened around Fomalhaut. Long before anyone on Earth noticed, two distant worlds, or perhaps two large icy bodies, may have crossed paths. The collision would have released an enormous cloud of fine dust. Sunlight reflecting from those tiny grains created the bright object our telescopes observed. Over time, the cloud naturally expanded. Its graceful transformation quietly revealed its true nature. The planet that once seemed so certain slowly faded from the story. Some people might imagine this as a disappointment, a discovery lost, a mistake corrected. But scientists often see something entirely different. The universe did not take knowledge away. It offered better knowledge in its place. Understanding became more accurate. The picture became clearer. The story became closer to reality. There is something deeply comforting about that. Imagine working on a beautiful painting. At first, the colours seem perfect, then softer light enters the room. You notice details you had overlooked. A shadow should be gentler, a tree should lean slightly farther. You make careful adjustments. The painting changes. It has not become worse, it has become truer. Science grows in much the same way. Its greatest strength has never been that it avoids mistakes. Its strength lies in its willingness to gently revise them. Every correction becomes another quiet step toward understanding. That lesson reaches far beyond astronomy. It reminds us that changing your mind is not weakness. It is often a sign that you have listened carefully. The universe itself is patient enough to allow us many chances. We look, we wonder, we learn, then we look again. Perhaps tomorrow another observation will reshape today's ideas. Perhaps another telescope will reveal details we cannot yet see. Each new generation of instruments quietly sharpens humanity's vision, much like morning sunlight slowly dissolving the last traces of mist across a peaceful valley. As you rest beneath your blanket tonight, breathing slowly and comfortably, you might imagine that distant cloud of dust still drifting around its young star. Each tiny grain reflects a little starlight. Each particle continues its quiet journey. No disappointment, no failure. Only another chapter in the patient conversation between curiosity and reality. The universe does not ask us to be correct immediately. It simply invites us to keep observing with open minds and gentle hearts. Because sometimes the greatest discoveries are not the answers we expected, but the quieter, more beautiful truths that patiently replace them. As the cloud of dust around Fomalhaut slowly fades into the darkness, another story quietly begins. It is another story of hope, another story of careful observation, and another gentle reminder that the universe is often more subtle than it first appears. This time the story begins much closer to home, not across hundreds of light years, not around a distant young star, but around the nearest stellar neighbour to our own sun. If you could travel beyond the edge of our solar system and continue across the immense darkness between the stars, the first destination you would eventually reach would be the Alpha Centauri system. For generations, people have looked toward those nearby stars with quiet curiosity. If another Earth-like world existed anywhere close to us, surely this would be one of the most promising places to search. The stars themselves seem almost familiar. Not because they are close in everyday terms, they remain unimaginably far away. But in the scale of the galaxy, they are our nearest neighbours. The thought is comforting, like seeing a warm light glowing in the window of a distant house across a quiet valley. One day, astronomers announced something remarkable. They believed they had found a planet. It was given a simple name, Alpha Centauri BB. The discovery spread quickly around the world. Many people imagined a small rocky world circling one of the stars closest to our own. Artists painted gentle landscapes beneath unfamiliar skies. Writers imagined future explorers standing upon its silent mountains. For a little while it seemed that another nearby world had stepped quietly into humanity's map of the cosmos. Yet finding planets around distant stars is an extraordinarily delicate task. Most planets cannot be photographed directly. They are simply too small, too faint, too close to the overwhelming brilliance of their stars. Instead, astronomers often notice planets indirectly. Imagine watching a parent gently holding the hand of a small child while walking through a park. From far away, you might think only the child is moving around the parent, but if you watch carefully, you notice something else. The parent also moves, only slightly. Both are quietly circling a shared balance between them. Stars behave in much the same way. As a planet circles its star, the star itself performs a tiny, graceful motion. It rocks gently back and forth. Not enough for human eyes to notice, only enough for incredibly sensitive instruments to measure. These motions are astonishingly small. Sometimes they are comparable to noticing the gentle movement of a single leaf on a distant tree while standing many kilometers away. Every tiny vibration inside the telescope, every subtle movement within the star itself, every small change in the instrument must be understood with extraordinary care. Nature whispers, it rarely shouts. As more observations of Alpha Centauri continued, researchers began studying the data again. They looked more carefully, compared more measurements, tested different explanations. Slowly, a quiet uncertainty appeared. The tiny signal that had seemed to belong to a planet might actually have come from the star itself. Stars are not perfectly still. Their surfaces ripple. Magnetic activity changes. Invisible currents rise and fall deep within them. Even the finest instruments carry their own tiny imperfections. When many delicate effects overlap, they can sometimes create patterns that resemble something they are not. Like sunlight dancing upon gentle waves, appearances can briefly fool even the most careful observer. Little by little, confidence in Alpha Centauri BB began to soften. The evidence became less certain. Eventually, many astronomers concluded that the original detection was probably not a planet after all. The nearby world that had inspired so much excitement quietly slipped back into uncertainty. It had not truly disappeared. Rather, it had returned to being a question. And questions have always been welcome in science. There is something unexpectedly peaceful about that. Imagine walking along a beach at dawn. Far ahead, you notice what looks like a beautiful shell resting on the sand. As you approach, the morning light changes. The shell slowly becomes nothing more than a smooth stone touched by sunlight. You do not feel disappointed. The shoreline has not become less beautiful. It has simply shown you its true shape. Astronomy often unfolds in exactly this way. The universe is unimaginably vast. The signals we seek are extraordinarily faint. Sometimes our first understanding proves correct. Sometimes it gently changes. Neither outcome is failure. Both are part of learning how to see more clearly. In fact, some of the greatest achievements in science come not from making discoveries, but from testing them honestly. There is quiet courage in saying, "We believed this was true. We looked again. And now we understand a little more." Every careful correction strengthens the foundation beneath future discoveries. It means that when a truly remarkable world is finally confirmed, we can welcome it with confidence rather than uncertainty. Today, astronomers continue searching the Alpha Centauri system with instruments far more capable than those available only a few years ago. New telescopes observe with greater precision. New methods continue to improve. The search has not ended. It has simply become wiser. Perhaps one day, another planet will indeed be found there. Perhaps several worlds already circle those familiar stars, patiently waiting until our instruments become quiet enough to notice them. The universe is under no obligation to reveal its secrets quickly. It has all the time it could ever need. And perhaps we are learning to become equally patient. As you rest now, you can imagine those nearby stars shining peacefully through the darkness. Whether or not unseen planets circle them tonight, their light continues its steady journey toward Earth. It asks for nothing. It rushes nowhere. It simply arrives, as it has for countless ages, carrying quiet possibilities across the immense ocean of space. Perhaps that is enough. Not certainty, not immediate answers, only the gentle promise that tomorrow's understanding may become just a little clearer than today's. Far beyond the orbit of the outer planets, where sunlight has grown soft and faint, two small spacecraft continue their endless journey. They no longer race toward a destination. They simply drift, patiently, silently, like tiny bottles carried across an unimaginably vast ocean. These travelers are called Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11. Launched many decades ago, they were among the very first human-made machines to venture toward the giant planets, and then continue onward into the darkness beyond. They passed mighty Jupiter. They explored majestic Saturn. Then they kept going, leaving behind the familiar neighborhood of our solar system. Even after their scientific work had ended, they continued moving outward, carrying humanity's quiet curiosity into the unknown. Although the spacecraft themselves had become silent, scientists on Earth continued following them with remarkable care. Powerful antennas listened for their faint radio signals. Every message took hours to arrive, travelling patiently across the enormous distance between the spacecraft and Earth. Each signal carried tiny pieces of information: how fast the spacecraft were moving, which direction they were facing, how their systems were quietly changing with time. For many years, everything seemed exactly as expected. The spacecraft obeyed the familiar laws that had guided planets, moons, and comets for centuries. Their paths could be predicted with extraordinary precision. Then, very gradually, someone noticed something unusual. It was not dramatic. No alarm sounded. No spacecraft suddenly turned around. Nothing spectacular appeared in the sky. Instead, there was only the smallest hint that something was slightly different. The Pioneer spacecraft seemed to be slowing down, just a little more than expected. The difference was astonishingly tiny, so tiny that, if the spacecraft had been birds gliding across an entire continent, the unexpected change would have been smaller than the gentle flutter of a single feather. It was almost invisible. Yet science has always been built upon noticing the nearly invisible. At first, many possibilities were quietly considered. Perhaps the calculations contained a small mistake. Perhaps the gravity of distant objects had been misunderstood. Perhaps unknown material floating through deep space was creating an almost imperceptible resistance. Or perhaps the universe itself was revealing something entirely new. The mystery became known as the Pioneer anomaly. For years, scientists worked patiently to understand it. Boxes of old documents were opened once again. Engineering notes that had not been examined for decades suddenly became important. Computer programs were rewritten. Every tiny detail was reconsidered. It was almost like restoring an old clock. At first glance, it seems to keep nearly perfect time, yet every small gear must be inspected carefully, every spring, every tiny movement. Only then does its quiet rhythm become fully understood. The Pioneer spacecraft asked for the same kind of patience. Nothing could be assumed. Everything deserved another careful look. Years passed. Researchers examined every possible explanation they could imagine. Some ideas quietly faded. Others seemed more promising. Then attention slowly turned towards something surprisingly ordinary: heat. When you hold a warm cup of tea on a cool evening, you can feel gentle warmth spreading into the surrounding air. The warmth quietly leaves the cup in every direction. You never notice it pushing the cup backward. The effect is far too small. In everyday life, it simply disappears beneath countless other motions. But space is wonderfully different. There is almost nothing there. No air. Very little dust. Almost no resistance at all. Tiny effects that would remain unnoticed on Earth can slowly become meaningful over millions and millions of kilometers. Inside the Pioneer spacecraft were instruments that generated warmth while they worked. That heat did not remain trapped forever. Little by little, it escaped into space. Not perfectly evenly. Some of it left the spacecraft slightly more in one direction than another. Imagine sitting quietly in a small canoe on a perfectly still lake. Now imagine gently tossing handfuls of tiny grains of sand behind you. Each handful is almost weightless. Each movement seems completely insignificant. Yet if you continued long enough, the canoe would begin drifting ever so slightly in the opposite direction. Not quickly, not dramatically, just enough that, over a very long journey, someone watching carefully from the shore might eventually notice. The escaping warmth from the Pioneer spacecraft behaved in a surprisingly similar way. Each tiny burst of invisible heat carried a minute amount of momentum away from the spacecraft. The effect was unimaginably small. Yet over decades of travel through the quiet emptiness of deep space, those tiny pushes gently accumulated. The mystery that had puzzled scientists for so many years slowly dissolved. The universe had not broken its own beautiful patterns. Instead, humanity had overlooked one very subtle detail. There is something deeply satisfying about that conclusion. Not because the answer was simple, it certainly was not. It required years of careful work by many thoughtful people. What makes it beautiful is something else. The mystery did not disappear because someone guessed correctly. It disappeared because people remained patient. They continued asking questions. They continued testing ideas. They remained willing to discover that the answer might be quieter than anyone had expected. Perhaps that is one of the greatest lessons science can offer. Reality rarely rushes. It rewards those who are willing to look gently, carefully, and again. Sometimes the smallest details become the most important. Sometimes a whisper explains what once seemed impossible. And sometimes the universe reminds us that wonder does not vanish when a mystery is solved. It simply changes shape. Tonight, Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11 continue their endless voyage. Though they no longer speak to Earth, they remain silent travelers beneath the stars, carrying the memory of a civilization that chose to explore. Somewhere in the darkness, they continue drifting, not too fast, not too slowly, simply following the quiet pathways that the universe has always offered. And perhaps, as they journey onward through the immense stillness, they leave behind one final lesson. The greatest discoveries are not always the ones that overturn everything we know. Sometimes they are the ones that teach us to notice the smallest, gentlest truths that were there all along. The Pioneer spacecraft taught us something gentle. Sometimes a mystery is not the beginning of a revolution. Sometimes it is simply an invitation to look more carefully. For a while, it seemed that patient observation had quietly restored order. The universe once again behaved exactly as expected. The stars continued shining. The planets continued circling the sun. The silent pathways of space remained calm and dependable. And then, another small mystery appeared. Not in the darkness beyond the planets, not in some distant corner of the galaxy, but surprisingly close to home. Imagine standing beside a peaceful river. You have watched hundreds of leaves float past. Each one follows the current almost perfectly. Some drift a little left, some drift a little right. Yet the overall journey is wonderfully predictable. Then one afternoon, a single leaf reaches a familiar bend in the river, and quietly moves just a little differently. Not enough to alarm you, not enough to change the river itself, only enough to make you pause and wonder. Did the water change? Was there a gentle breeze? Or did you simply notice something that had always been there? Spacecraft sometimes perform a graceful maneuver known as a gravity assist. You can imagine it as a quiet dance. Rather than carrying enough fuel to travel everywhere on their own, spacecraft often borrow a tiny portion of a planet's motion. As they pass close to a world, gravity gently bends their path. The spacecraft leaves travelling in a new direction, sometimes a little faster than before, while the planet gives up such a tiny amount of its own motion that the change is far too small for anyone to notice. It is one of the most elegant ideas in space exploration. Instead of struggling against nature, engineers learn to travel with it, like a sailor allowing the wind to fill a sail, or a bird gliding effortlessly upon rising air. Again and again, these gentle encounters with planets have carried spacecraft across the solar system, toward Jupiter, toward Saturn, toward distant comets, toward worlds that would otherwise remain beyond our reach. The mathematics describing these graceful passages has been tested countless times. It is remarkably reliable. Yet during a handful of flybys around Earth, something curious happened. After carefully measuring the spacecraft's path before and after the encounter, scientists noticed that a few of them seemed to leave Earth travelling ever so slightly faster, or occasionally a little slower, than the calculations had predicted. The difference was extraordinarily small, far smaller than anything a passenger could ever feel. If you were riding aboard one of those spacecraft, the change would be completely invisible to you. The engines had not fired. Nothing dramatic had occurred. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. And yet the measurements quietly suggested that something tiny had happened. This became known as the flyby anomaly. It was never a large mystery. No spacecraft was lost. No mission failed. Every journey continued successfully. Still, scientists are naturally curious about even the smallest surprises. The universe has often taught us that tiny details can open the door to deeper understanding. Researchers began examining every part of the problem. Perhaps Earth's atmosphere had influenced the spacecraft more than expected. Perhaps the planet's shape had introduced subtle effects. Perhaps distant tides, tiny variations in gravity, or the gentle influence of sunlight had played a role. Even the rotation of our own planet became part of the investigation. One by one, possibilities were explored. Some explanations became less convincing. Others seemed promising for a time, yet no single answer completely explained every observation. Unlike the Pioneer anomaly, which gradually found a satisfying explanation through years of careful study, the flyby anomaly remains less certain. Some spacecraft displayed it, others did not. Some observations were larger, others were barely noticeable. It is a puzzle made not of dramatic events, but of whispers. Imagine listening to soft rain falling upon a quiet roof. Most drops create the familiar rhythm you expect. Then, every so often, one drop lands with a slightly different sound. Not louder, not stranger. Simply different enough that your ears notice it. Was it a larger drop? A different tile? A small gust of wind? The gentle rhythm continues before you can know for certain. The flyby anomaly feels much like that. A tiny difference hidden within an otherwise beautiful pattern. As our instruments have improved over the years, many scientists have suggested that increasingly precise measurements may eventually explain these curious observations. Perhaps they arise from subtle details that earlier models could not fully capture. Perhaps they reflect tiny measurement uncertainties that become visible only when our instruments grow extraordinarily sensitive. Or perhaps they will lead us toward an aspect of planetary motion we have not yet completely understood. For now, no one can say with confidence. And strangely enough, that is perfectly all right. Science has never required every question to be answered immediately. Some questions remain patiently on the shelf for years. Others wait for an entirely new generation of instruments. Some simply ask us to become better observers before revealing their quiet truth. There is something deeply comforting in knowing that our own neighbourhood still contains small mysteries. We often imagine that Earth is completely understood because it is our home. Yet every careful measurement reminds us that understanding is not a destination. It is a lifelong journey. Even familiar places continue offering gentle surprises to those willing to notice them. Perhaps that is true not only in astronomy, but in life itself. The places we think we know best often reveal new beauty when we return with quieter eyes. Tonight, as Earth continues its peaceful journey around the Sun, countless satellites circle overhead. Spacecraft continue navigating with extraordinary precision. Each follows invisible pathways shaped by gravity, light, motion, and time. Almost every journey unfolds exactly as expected, and every now and then, the universe quietly offers one more tiny question. Not to confuse us, not to challenge us, but simply to remind us that curiosity is never finished. For every mystery that gently settles into understanding, another waits patiently just beyond it, like the next bend in a slow, quiet river. You have now wandered through ancient starlight. You have drifted beyond familiar planets. You have imagined distant civilizations. You have listened for whispers across the stars. You have followed silent spacecraft into the darkness. And with every gentle step, the universe has quietly revealed another layer of itself. Yet now, perhaps, it offers its most surprising thought of all. Imagine standing beside a peaceful ocean, just before sunrise. The water stretches endlessly toward the horizon. Soft waves rise and fall with perfect patience. The surface seems complete. Nothing appears hidden, and yet you know that beneath those gentle ripples lies another world entirely. Great currents move silently through the depths. Mountains rise from the seafloor. Creatures drift through waters that sunlight has never reached. The calm surface is real, but it's only the beginning of the story. The universe may be much the same. Every star you've ever seen, every glowing nebula, every bright galaxy suspended across the night, all of them together may represent only a small portion of reality. For centuries, humanity believed that the stars were almost everything. If something could not be seen, it was difficult to imagine that it existed. Then our instruments became more patient, our observations became more careful, and little by little, the universe began revealing a quiet secret. The story began with galaxies. When astronomers carefully measured how stars moved inside these immense islands of light, they expected something rather simple. Stars close to the centre, where most of the visible matter appeared to gather, should move differently from stars much farther away. The graceful dance should slowly change with distance. Instead, the galaxies behaved strangely. The outer stars continued moving much faster than expected. According to everything astronomers could see, those stars should have drifted away long ago, yet they remained, calmly circling their galaxies as though something unseen was gently holding everything together. Imagine watching children on a merry-go-round in a quiet park. It spins a little faster, then faster still. You naturally expect the riders near the edge to lose their grip, unless someone is holding them securely. Now imagine seeing those riders remain perfectly safe, even though no one appears to be supporting them. You would quietly begin wondering whether there was something invisible beneath the surface. Not magic, simply something you had not yet noticed. That is very close to what astronomers experienced. The galaxies appeared to contain far more than their visible stars alone. Something unseen seemed to surround them, not glowing, not reflecting light, not announcing its presence, only quietly revealing itself through gravity. Scientists eventually gave this mysterious presence a remarkably modest name: dark matter. The word dark does not mean evil, nor does it mean empty. It simply reminds us that this mysterious substance does not shine the way ordinary matter does. It neither glows like stars nor reflects light like planets. It remains hidden from our eyes. Yet its gentle gravitational embrace appears to shape galaxies throughout the universe. Imagine walking through a meadow before dawn. A soft mist covers the ground. You cannot see the breeze moving through it, yet the grass bends together. The wildflowers sway. The mist itself slowly changes shape. You never actually see the wind. You only notice its quiet influence. Dark matter is rather like that unseen breeze. No telescope has photographed it directly. Instead, astronomers observe the gentle ways it appears to influence everything around it. The more carefully scientists observe the universe, the more often this invisible companion seemed to appear. Galaxies gathered together more strongly than visible matter alone could explain. Clusters of galaxies behaved as though they rested inside enormous invisible structures. Even light itself, travelling across billions of years, sometimes curved slightly while passing through regions where little visible matter could be found. It was almost as though enormous transparent landscapes stretched across the cosmos. Invisible mountains, invisible valleys, invisible rivers guiding entire galaxies through space. Then, just as humanity slowly began becoming comfortable with this astonishing idea, the universe quietly offered another surprise. It was not enough that much of reality appeared invisible. The universe itself also seemed to be expanding in an unexpected way. For many years, astronomers expected gravity to act like a gentle hand. The expansion that began long ago should gradually slow as galaxies quietly pulled upon one another across the immense distances of space. Instead, careful observations revealed something astonishing. The expansion was not slowing. It appeared to be becoming faster. Imagine rolling a small boat across an utterly calm lake. You expect it to gradually lose speed. The water should gently slow its journey. Now imagine watching the boat continue moving, then somehow begin drifting faster all by itself, even though no one is rowing and no wind touches the surface. You would immediately realize that something unseen must also be part of the story. Scientists gave this second mystery another simple name: dark energy, not because they fully understand it. Quite the opposite. The name is simply a gentle label placed upon something that remains deeply mysterious. It describes whatever appears to be encouraging the expansion of the universe to continue growing faster with time. Perhaps one day humanity will understand both dark matter and dark energy completely. Perhaps future generations will smile at these names, just as we now smile at some of the early ideas people once held about the stars. Or perhaps these mysteries will remain companions for a very long time. There is no hurry. The universe has always been patient. As your breathing grows slower, you might imagine floating peacefully above the visible universe. Below you shine billions of galaxies like scattered lanterns across an endless night. Beautiful, bright, comforting. Then imagine, very gently, another landscape slowly becoming visible, not made of light, not made of colour, but woven quietly through everything. An invisible ocean supporting the glowing islands above it. Perhaps the stars are only the surface. Perhaps galaxies are only the waves, and perhaps the greater part of reality lies beneath them, calm and unseen, patiently shaping the universe in ways we're only beginning to understand. The shoreline is beautiful. It always has been, but every shoreline quietly reminds you of something larger. Beyond the gentle waves, there is always the open sea. Very slowly, without even noticing exactly when it happened, our long journey begins to circle back toward home. Not because we have reached the end of the universe. The universe has no obvious ending waiting to be found, and not because every mystery has been solved. If anything, there are more mysteries now than when we first began. Instead, we return because something inside you has quietly changed. Long ago, at the beginning of this journey, you simply looked upward. The night sky was beautiful. The stars felt distant. The universe seemed impossibly large. Now, after wandering together through ancient galaxies and silent planets, after following light that travelled longer than human civilization has existed, after listening for distant voices, after watching tiny spacecraft disappear into the darkness, after standing beside invisible oceans of matter and energy, you find yourself exactly where you began, looking up. The stars have not changed, but perhaps the way you see them has. Every point of light now feels a little deeper. Every quiet darkness between the stars seems a little less empty. Every distant galaxy carries the gentle reminder that countless stories continue unfolding beyond the reach of our eyes. There is something comforting about realizing that the universe never asked us to understand everything. It never demanded perfect answers. It simply invited us to notice, to observe, to wonder. Imagine sitting beside a small campfire on a peaceful evening. The flames dance softly. Above you stretches an endless sky filled with stars. You do not feel the need to count every one of them. You do not feel disappointed that some remain hidden beyond the horizon. Their presence alone is enough. Wonder does not grow smaller because mystery remains. In many ways, mystery is what allows wonder to continue breathing. Throughout history, every generation believed it understood a little more than the one before, and every generation was right. Yet every new discovery also opened another quiet doorway. The telescope revealed galaxies. Galaxies revealed expansion. Expansion revealed ancient light. Ancient light revealed deeper questions. Invisible matter appeared. Invisible energy followed. Every answer became the beginning of another gentle conversation. Perhaps knowledge is not a staircase with a final step. Perhaps it is more like walking through a peaceful forest at dawn. Each bend in the path reveals another. Each clearing opens toward another grove of ancient trees. The journey itself quietly becomes the destination. There is something beautifully human about that. Among all the worlds we've imagined tonight, among every silent civilization we wondered about, among every mysterious signal, hidden planet, and invisible galaxy, one small species on one small world continues asking gentle questions beneath the stars. Perhaps curiosity itself is one of the universe's rarest treasures, not because it belongs only to humanity, but because whenever it appears, the universe gains another way of quietly observing itself. You're made from atoms that were patiently forged inside ancient stars long before Earth existed. Those stars completed their lives, returning their elements to space. Clouds of dust slowly gathered. New stars were born, planets quietly formed, oceans appeared, life learned to breathe, life learned to remember, life learned to wonder. And eventually, through an unimaginably long chain of gentle events, you opened your eyes beneath the night sky. There is no need to hurry through thoughts like these. They are not puzzles waiting to be solved before morning. They are simply places where the mind may rest for a little while. The universe has existed for far longer than any human story. It will continue long after every one of us has finished our own small chapter. At first, that thought can seem overwhelming, but tonight, perhaps it feels different. Perhaps it feels comforting. The stars do not ask anything from you. The galaxies expect nothing. The quiet laws that guide planets around their suns continue with patient kindness, whether anyone is watching or not. You are allowed to simply be here, just for this moment, breathing slowly, listening softly, existing as one small, beautiful part of a story far larger than yourself, and somehow, rather than making your life smaller, that thought makes it feel wonderfully connected. You belong to this universe, not as a visitor, not as an outsider, but as one of its countless expressions. The calcium within your bones, the iron flowing quietly through your blood, the oxygen filling your lungs, the carbon woven through every living cell. Each was born during journeys that began among the stars. The universe has never truly been separate from you. It has been quietly becoming you all along. As your breathing grows slower still, imagine the night sky gently turning above the earth. The constellations continue their ancient procession. The moon follows its peaceful path. Far beyond, galaxies drift almost imperceptibly through expanding space. None of them hurry. None of them fear tomorrow. Everything unfolds with extraordinary patience. Perhaps that is the final lesson the universe offers. Not certainty, not endless answers, patience. The quiet confidence that understanding arrives one observation at a time, one generation at a time, one peaceful night beneath the stars at a time. And now, as this journey slowly comes to rest, you no longer need to search for distant galaxies. You no longer need to imagine invisible oceans or forgotten civilizations. There is nothing left to solve tonight, only the gentle rhythm of your breathing, the quiet weight of your blanket, the calm awareness that somewhere above, beyond the clouds and beyond the endless blue of day, the stars continue shining exactly as they always have. They will still be there tomorrow, and the next night, and the night after that, patiently waiting, quietly glowing, holding their ancient light until someone else, somewhere, looks up with the same gentle curiosity. Perhaps that someone will be another child, another scientist, another dreamer, or perhaps one peaceful evening in the future, it will simply be you once again. Until then, you are safe. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to understand tonight. Just listen, just rest, and let the universe continue its quiet journey while you gently drift into sleep.